All right, good evening. Welcome everybody to the Berwick Planning Board. This is a regular meeting for Thursday, January 7th, 2021. If we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Planning Board members present tonight. We have the Vice Chair, Nicole Fecto. We have regular member David Ross Lyons. Also on our Zoom, we have regular member Michael LaRue and alternate Jerry Graybill. So with the absence of a regular member who has left the board, Jerry, you'll be voting tonight, okay? Also, we have our town code enforcement officer, Jennifer, on Zoom. And then we have here in the audience, we have our town planner, James. And we have the applicant here for this application. Is there anybody in a waiting room waiting to get on for public comment?
Nope.
Okay. So there's no members of the public here, so we won't have any public comment session. Next on the agenda is the approval of minutes for the December 3rd, 2020 meeting. So we've got 4 people who were present for that meeting, at this meeting tonight.
No, you don't. Do you? Oh, Jerry was there, yeah.
Yeah, Jerry.
Missed that.
Got 2.
Nice work on the James. We have a motion that we accept the minutes.
We have a motion from David to accept the minutes. We have a second.
I'll second.
Seconded by Michael. And further discussion? Okay, Nicole?
Abstain.
David?
Yes.
Mike?
Yeah.
Jerry?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. 4-0. All right. Next on the agenda is new business, sketch plan, site plan review, 20 Sullivan Street. The applicant, or this is the VC and SCI zone in the Village Overlay District, and the applicant is Great Falls Construction. I'll turn it over to the town planner.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It's a long time in the making. This is a sketch plan for a site plan. Given the scope and scale of this project, the Great Falls Construction and thought it was appropriate to check in at a conceptual level. The edge is the former prime tanning site. It's 7.9 acres and it's in the Village Commercial District. It's also subject to the Village Overlay District. So the Village Overlay District is part of a hybrid form-based code, has form requirements, and it's also subject to zoning as well. The following are the core objectives for the Village Overlay District. It will improve and expand Berwick's downtown and provide connections to open space and adjacent residential neighborhoods. Will allow for repurposing of former industrial buildings and new buildings for commercial and residential uses, allowing for a core downtown area of higher density mixed use, including low impact manufacturing, offices, retail, and other commercial businesses and multifamily housing. There's a continuous open space known as a greenway will run through the former tannery site, connecting recreational areas to the downtown neighborhoods, to the community open space near now the existing fire station. The Village Overlay will have a tight network of streets, including a new main street with wide sidewalks, street trees, and buildings set close to the street, or with frontings on pleasing outdoor public spaces. And a greenway connects public open spaces to the downtown and to adjacent neighborhoods. And there's a wide range of residential buildings. So that's an overview, and now for some of the details from a vote that failed Tuesday. We had a litany of ordinance changes that we were looking for, and I can speak to some of the issues now for the site plan and conformance issues. The first thing is parking, and a couple waivers would be required, which are embedded in our Village Overlay District. 6.4.4.1, the planning board may waive or adjust all requirements for parking within the Village Overlay District when it is not possible or it is in the best interest of the town to meet the requirements. So that would speak to the max parking lot size, but also embedded in 6.4 is a reference to 7.7, which speaks to requirements for residential units, and it just, I'll let Craig speak later on about how it just really wouldn't be possible to have a max of 30 parking spaces and meet section 7.7. Also, it's a waiver would be required and permissible to allow angle parking on Main Street. Other issues, there's a max building footprint for building number 5.
Can you just go back and explain to people who might be watching at home
Absolutely.
the current parking requirements and why they are requesting a waiver?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a max parking space requirement, and that was done because through some of the site plans we had seen, there was very large parking areas in the middle of the downtown, and the purpose of the max area is to keep the site walkable, presentable. And then for the whole purpose of having parallel mandated on Main Street, that actually was something I advocated for back when we had about an 8-month run where the planning board and Vision Berwick, we met once or twice a week to nail down this village overlay section. The whole purpose of having parallel parking along Main Street is to keep the street more narrow, but there's also a trade-off where they're proposing multiple storefronts along Main Street. To have angle parking in front of those buildings, it will help the viability of those offerings and just make them more valuable. So to speak to the crossings and keeping it pedestrian crossing, you'll see that they have a few crosswalks where they have bump outs, so they do keep that campus feel of being able to cross Main Street and keep it walkable. So that's parking. And so the other piece is the max footprint. 5.2.c.5 allows a provision for replacement of a structure by building a new structure. And they can build in a way so if it's located on the lot, so the nonconformity is improved. So by building a 30,000 square foot building, they're replacing a 40,000 square foot building and therefore increasing the conformity. On building 3, 4, and 7, if it's okay with you, Dave, to defer to Craig to speak to those issues and kind of the conversations we've had to meet conformity.
Okay, thanks, James. I'll
Yep.
turn it over to you. If you could just state your name and business and that you're representing the applicant.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Craig Burgess. I am with Sebago Technics. We are based out of South Portland, Maine. I'm a project manager there. We have staff of about 70, and we have many different service areas. And on this project, we'll be providing the civil engineering, the surveying, the landscape architecture, and the traffic engineering. Tonight, I'm representing Great Falls. John Smith is here with me tonight, and Cynthia Smith is also on the Zoom call tonight as well. And Julie, sorry. So I have a little bit of a presentation, but I'm not going to bore everyone tonight with all the details. I'm sure that everyone in the town and the planning board has been very involved on the site. It's a very prominent site in Berwick, and Great Falls and Sebago Technics, we understand just how important this project really is. And we're invested in making this a very great project for the town of Berwick. My presentation has some highlights of the site. You know, this was originally developed, I think, back in the 1800s, but more recently, in the 1930s, it was developed as a tannery site, which shut down in 2008. It is now a brownfield site, and over the years since 2008, it has gone through the efforts to clean up the site. And I know that the planning board has been involved, and there's been just a lot of discussions around this site to get it to the point where it is today. And today, it currently out there is 3 buildings and a cap. And that, moving forward with this project, we're just going to have to be very careful around the brownfill standards and the VRAP standards associated with that cleanup effort. And there'll be some coordination back and forth with Maine DEP on that. As James mentioned, the site is approximately 8 acres. It is within the Village Overlay District standards. And there are many, many standards that are almost specific to this site that we have gone through and started to develop a site plan that almost goes through each one of those standards and addresses it in a way that's going to make this a really nice project. Around 10 1- to 3-story mixed-use residential and commercial buildings are proposed at this time. 4 new curb cuts serving 2 new roadways, a main roadway connecting Sullivan and School Streets. The project will propose creation of green spaces, sidewalks, plaza areas for the public to use. And it will involve the tear down and demolition of the 2 buildings to the north over here. And the L-shaped building to the southeast will be renovated as part of this project. Earlier this year, Sebago completed an existing condition survey of this site. At the onset of Sebago Technic's involvement here, we received a lot of data on the site, which had a lot of different plans. We took the time to go through all those plans and really soak in all of the information that there was. Sebago Technic's referenced those plans and going out and conducting this survey. And so what you're looking at here is the survey that we submitted as part of the sketch plan application. These are the 2 buildings to the north which will be demolished as part of this project. Great Falls looked at possibly saving these buildings, and as everyone's aware, the buildings out there on the site today are antiquated and need of a lot of work. So at this time, Great Falls feels that it's best and it really won't fit well with this project. So those 2 buildings are being demolished as part of this project. The building to the south, this L-shaped building, will be protected and renovated. In my presentation, I have several photos that just show what these buildings look like from a higher level. And you can just see how they are in need of so much attention, and they're falling apart. And if you look at this building right here, you can just get a really good understanding just how much work it would take to try to save these buildings. Even the building that's being renovated, you can see how the north side of that building is just completely open to the elements. Great Falls looked at this building, and actually the frame of it is actually in fairly good shape. So this building will be renovated as part of this project. We do know that, and we understand that there is such a rich history here at this site, and so we're trying to do our best effort to preserve some part of the site that's out there today. We also recognize that there's a memorial site to the south, and if you had a chance to review the sketch plan, you'll see that general area of the site will be maintained as like a green space, and that memorial will be rebuilt to honor the site's rich history. So over the last year, Sebago has worked with Great Falls to develop this site layout. We went through many different iterations and looked at some of the past concepts that have been developed as part of the VRAP cleanups process. And this sketch plan is what Great Falls envisions as the best use of this property. It's bringing in 10 new buildings, and as I mentioned, that existing L-shaped building will be completely renovated. Two new curb cuts will serve what we're calling the new Main Street. One curb cut is on School Street and the other is on Sullivan Street. And this is the main arterial serving this site. There's another access road which will have a curb cut on Wilson Street over in this area. And then lastly, a 4th curb cut, another one on School Street, serving a drive-through area another building, and a parking area. And as James alluded to, we're going to be needing a waiver for this angled parking that you see along Main Street here. This plan, as it's shown now, is very preliminary in nature still. We totally anticipate going back and revisiting some of the sites and adding a lot more detail as we move forward into the site plan approval process. But really, and we really appreciate you allowing us to come here today at this level. We understand that it's not part of the process, but this project is just so significant. There's a lot of moving parts here, and before we really dive into the design, we really want to get your feedback on what you see are some other potential issues, what you like, what you don't like. This is the parking area here. This is the largest parking area that's currently proposed. I believe there's around 60 parking spaces or so just in this parking lot alone. There's another one over here closer to School Street, which will be 40 parking spaces. The current standards require 1.5 to 2 parking spaces per residential unit, depending on the number of bedrooms. Within this overlay zone, there are no parking requirements actually for commercial space. But I think we all understand that that's not technically reasonable if you want patrons to go to these commercial spaces. So there needs to be some allowance for parking for the commercial on site, but also residential, which we would hope that the residential is a little bit more separated from the commercial parking, which would really be along the access drive and then the main street. So to really get those numbers to work, we have to find parking on this site. And at this time, we don't know how many residential units are proposed. Great Falls is still working through that. We don't know what the total square footage of commercial space and residential space is. We'll know that for our next submission going forward, but we'd like to get a little bit of feedback from you tonight on how you see parking, because really we want to be able to make the parking work on this site. We also understand that there are some concept plans out there for some additional striping on Sullivan and School for additional parallel parking spaces. We don't show that on this plan now, and I would hope that we can start to integrate some of those concept plans into the next iteration of this site plan. So there is this parking issue that we have to talk about tonight, and we would be asking for a waiver just to try to build in as much parking for residential. It's really the residential that I think that we need to find parking for, because that's the biggest need for parking. Other things like the walkway widths, crosswalks, we can work through those details to make it work. There are a couple other issues that James brought up, including building size. So Great Falls will look closer into some of the larger buildings. There's 3 large buildings that exceed that 15,000 square foot minimum footprint. It's Building 5, Building 3, and Building 4. So I would like to have a discussion around that tonight, but I think that we'll probably have to go back and look to see if there are opportunities to kind of break that into smaller footprints, unless the board sees a path forward where we can keep the general footprints as depicted on this plan. These footprints just generally represent the most efficient way to use this space, both for commercial and residential. The egress onto School Street, right now we're still evaluating this, and we understand that this overlay district also requires buildings to be a minimum distance from the property line. And you can probably see here that the coffee shop that we're showing just doesn't meet that. So we're exploring different opportunities to try to make that standard work, so that that isn't a standard that doesn't meet the ordinance. But we would also like to get your feedback tonight on your thoughts on that, because we explored many different ways to have a drive-through at this area. I think we all recognize that School Street is the most busy street, So the frontage along School Street is very important to Great Falls, very important to the tenants that will be here. So having a coffee shop and a bank, those are anchor tenants. So we really want to try to make this work for Great Falls, for the tenants. And having a coffee shop here, it gets a lot of people into the site, it gets a lot of people using the commercial space, it will be an anchor tenant for them. You can see that this area of the site is fairly limited. It's in a area of the site which is, it's starting to get a little bit restricted just due to space and trying to save this existing building. So we're really trying to shoehorn this in that to create a design that actually works. There is a little bit more of a coordination effort that is necessary with Maine DOT, and we have scheduled a pre-application meeting with them to discuss this project, the curb cuts that are proposed, as well as this drive-through, and potentially evaluating the opportunity to have 2 exits onto School Street for the drive-through if this building orientation does not work for the board. Here's a picture of where that frontage is along School Street. So you can see that this site will really dress this area up pretty good. It's across the street from the fire station. There is the town's pump station here. And it would be nice if, as part of this project, that in working with the town, we can come up with a way to add some more screening at this pump station, because it's going to be right there at the project. And this project is, we really want to make it look nice. So it'd be nice if we can integrate some new landscaping or screening at that pump station. As part of the sketch plan application, we also submitted a lot of different architectural renderings provided by Ryan Senator Architecture. And it gives you an idea of what the massing looks like. And I believe Ryan may be on tonight if there are any architectural related questions. But you can see what this site may look like. Again, this is very conceptual in nature. As part of the next step moving forward, we will submit elevation views, floor plans, and the detailing of all the different facades. So you can see how this site really kind of creates that downtown feeling that Great Falls wants to create here, especially along this main street between these 2 buildings, these 2 larger buildings right here. So we understand that there's a 15,000 square foot minimum footprint, but you can see how these larger footprints would work here. There are some interesting features proposed as part of this project, including potentially a bridge at the entry right across here from Town Hall. This bridge would provide connectivity between these 2 buildings here, and also just kind of really set the tone as people enter the site.
Can I just ask you to go to the north or to the right? Yeah, that. Is that building depicted on the plans? 'Cause I thought there was a parking lot there.
This area right here, yeah.
No, go down right there. That big.
On the bottom, that one right there.
Yeah, that would be building
Does it look?
5.
Yeah, it doesn't look like, it looks like maybe underneath the building is parking.
Well, building 5 is just this. Looks like an I-shaped building.
Let me go back to that and we can
Yeah.
compare.
It's like the
But what I'm
first.
seeing on
I
that
agree,
rendering
yeah.
is it looked like there was no parking lot there.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like the parking is maybe under the building, like it's the building starts at level 2.
Yeah, the parking
How'd you-
would be underneath that first level.
So see how the parking lots are kind of a light gray and the buildings are a different color? If the parking is under the building.
Oh, so this whole thing is a building.
Correct.
I got you.
Yeah, and the parking is under it. Same
Okay.
thing with over here, building number 4, which is kind of like an L-shaped.
Under or the first floor.
All right,
Yeah,
so
right?
the first, yeah, like.
one of
I
them.
see that
underground,
rendering
but
because I thought this
yeah.
was I thought this was a parking lot,
Right,
and I
right.
thought that this was.
Yeah, and
okay.
you're like, wait a minute, where's the lack of parking? Yeah.
So again, we really appreciate you seeing us tonight and allowing us to present this project. We're hoping to have a good conversation to get as much feedback as possible so that when it comes time to actually make a site plan submission, that we have something that you've seen at this level, but it won't change a whole lot from what you're seeing here, is what the intent would be. So with that said, I'm here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, David?
I'm really looking at the School Street cutouts and bump outs, or curb cuts, excuse me. Entrances for the drive-throughs are going to be on that first cutout
Yeah,
and back up into this parking lot. Is that correct?
that we're exploring different opportunities there, whether that needs to be just an exit only or if it can be a two-way.
Okay.
And that's a conversation that we're going to have with.
I just see one issue there of traffic backing up, then creating cars not being able to get out of any of these spots, which then in turn people are going to start parking out on School Street to get into the banks, get their coffee, whatever the case may be.
i.e. South Berwick.
Right. That's one question and concern I have.
We completely understand that. That's actually a concern that we have too. And moving forward, as part of when we start to refine this, we're going to look at what the queuing potentially will be and
Okay.
how to best address that.
Okay. That's number one, but I'll continue on after, so go ahead.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, Michael?
I'm good, thank you.
Jerry?
I'm good for right now.
Nicole?
I got a lot of questions, Craig. But he asked me last. So since you don't know how many residential units you're actually going to have, we don't know. My question is, how many spaces are you short from meeting the requirements? So that would be a question that when you come to the next, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we're not going to tell you whether we're going to grant a waiver right now, but it would be good to know like how many spaces we're short. I am the one that hates doing parking waivers, but I understand the need for them. So that's one question I will have. Are these all two-way streets?
Yes.
Okay. The green space, is it just gonna be grass? Like I see like this big one behind building number 5, is that like just big grass mowed lawn? Or do you?
It won't. We're going to put a lot of attention into all
Okay.
those grassed areas. We
Dog
have-
park would be good, just saying.
We do. Sebago Technics does have a landscape architect involved, which
Okay.
will look at each and every one of those green spaces
Okay.
to try to make them the most usable space that they can
Yeah.
be.
I'm an anti-grasser, so I just.
Some of it will
thinks
be
it's
grass, but I know
ridiculous.
that there may be features such as site benches
Yeah.
and more areas with detailed landscaping.
I know outdoor space is very important to our folks in town. So the building size thing, the reason why we had this building size limitation, the purpose when we created the land use ordinance, the amendment to it, was so we didn't get a bunch of big warehouse-looking buildings downtown. And now I know people looking, when they see these pictures, they're going to say, oh my God, they're a bunch of big concrete buildings. I actually am from a small town that had a developer come in and do something very similar to this, and now I see how this happens, and it looks great. Like they did it, and it's great, and it went from a sleepy town to a bustling town. It's wonderful. So I think that breaking up the facades and when you come back with those elevations, that's going to really help people to see it, and I think you might get a little bit more buy-in than showing people this, because I think people are going to see just a bunch of big buildings. You're from New England. We're used to New England where it's a bunch of little buildings stuck together, not these big concrete structures. So I think that's what the purpose of the building size was. And if you could show us that it looks like different spaces or the facades are broken up so it doesn't look like a giant concrete warehouse, you'll get, we're happy to work with however we can within the constraints of our land use ordinance. We're happy to work with you however we can on that, I'm sure. That's all I have for right this minute.
Yeah, and of course, we'll have to work with James and the planning department on whether or not there's even an avenue that we can go down where that standard could be waived or
Right.
considered.
Yeah.
And I know that Great Falls only intends to make these buildings look really nice. And you'll be impressed with the architectural plans that we submit.
I can't wait to see it.
So I have a few questions that came in from some people from the public that was emailed to me, but I'll just start with mine. So what we're calling Main Street right now you mentioned that's going to be a two-way. Is that going to be a public right-of-way, or is that going to be maintained by Great Falls?
That's going to be maintained by Great Falls.
Okay, so the town's not going to be responsible for paving, plowing
At this point, correct.
at this point?
Well, at this point, just on conversations I've had with Great Falls, that will remain private.
Sidewalks as well, because sidewalk maintenance is huge.
The entire site
Okay.
And lighting?
and lighting.
Okay, so then the other road, which we'll just call, you know, the one that's coming in from Wilson, that's going to be a two-way as well?
Yes.
Okay. Who's going to maintain the green space?
I believe this entire site will remain private, thus under the maintenance of Great Falls.
So the town will not take over the green space? Because I know that initially, a number of years ago, we had talked about if anything's going to go in there, it's imperative that the town takes over the green space.
We can have that conversation with James and what those discussions were, and where there could be a potential consideration for that. But at this point, the intent at this level would be that the entire site would remain private.
Because the concern can be, what right would people who do not live in there, could they use it? Could the town be able to have a concert out on one of these green spaces, or have some, summer farmers market out on one of these green spaces? It seems like they wouldn't be able to. And, short of a handshake agreement, that doesn't really work that well. I mean, it would have to be something that would really have to be ironed out, because one of the big things that we were going back and forth years ago was that we have to have a green space downtown. It has to be used by the people in the town for events that we want. But it almost seems like this, and I like the plans, by the way, don't get me wrong, I'm just bringing up some things. It almost seems like this could be a condominium complex that if I went to a nice condominium and I sat out on the lawn, somebody could say, hey, beat it, you're trespassing.
I would do that to you immediately.
I know you would. So, I mean, that's my big concern with this right off the bat.
That's a great comment. I think we could potentially look at some easements on the site in some of the larger areas and through like sidewalk areas to ensure that the public does have access onto the site. And the site will have a lot of commercial on the first floor, so there will be just that, the public will be welcome to go to the commercial uses. So
This almost sounds like, are you familiar with Dover Point in Dover?
Oh, yeah.
That new development that went in where it's mixed use,
Yeah,
and it's
you're
they
right.
this looks identical to this, except that theirs is like 5 times bigger with individual houses on it as well. But it's mixed use, and it's almost the same way. So I really think that we should dig into that, because I know, not that I don't think that this is going to be a reality, but one of the big things was we have to have it. We want a town green. We want town green space down there. So if you'd like to come forward, just state your name for the record. And
Yeah. Hi, my name is John Smith with Great Falls, and I just want to address this quickly because we hadn't really talked about it with Craig, but I think we do have some experience in this, and I think that Craig is right. The proposal right now is that it is all private, but on the area that's for public use, generally, one vehicle we've used in the past that's very successful is a licensing agreement. An easement is an opportunity, is a possibility as well, but usually a licensing agreement really allows good definition around that. And
could you explain that?
well, it's an agreement. It's a form of agreement that allows usage by whatever the terms of the agreement are. So public usage. I mean, the general challenge with public use on private property is liability. That's the big problem. The license agreement allows for a good definition on how that works, and it allows the public use of the property. And in that agreement, the town is able to ensure that. But it's not like a lease agreement or anything like that. The licensing agreement allows for it to remain private, but for public use on it. It's kind of, I mean, there's other vehicles, but that's one that's been really successful in the past. We have a property that's an old school property. It's 11 acres, and it has one building on it and multiple fields and tennis courts and things like that on it. And that, we went back and forth, and really a good option on that particular property was a licensing agreement. So we're open to sort of whatever makes sense from an agreement perspective. But the biggest thing is that we need, we need to figure out that whole insurance piece of it.
Yeah.
That the town is able to offer, and so the agreement needs to reflect that.
I'm just thinking, for instance, if you look at the south side of the property here, Sawmill Hill, School Street, Sullivan Street, like where we have the town sign, and people put political signs up there, farmers market signs. That would technically, that's private property at that point.
Right.
I mean, I guess it is. Our sign is on private property at this point.
Pretty close.
Yeah.
If not, it is.
I mean, I don't think it's pretty close. I think that it is.
We had that discussion before. I mean, it's not, so it's a handshake agreement now. It's not an issue, but obviously moving forward, it would make sense to formalize that in some sort of agreement. I would toss out a licensing agreement. If you have a different agreement that makes sense, we certainly would entertain that, with the ultimate goal being the public use of it for things like that, the ability to put signs up and for the public to be on there, but just really covering the liability side of it.
Sounds
That's
like a
the important thing.
selectman problem, not a planning board problem.
No, it sounds like, huh?
It sounds like a Steve problem.
Well, it sounds like a problem that we need to keep on top of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's ensuring public access. I think it's a good point, making sure that feel, but we don't want to maintain it necessarily. But
We
No,
just want to use
no,
it.
that's not necessarily true. That's not
Welcome to
necessarily true.
America.
When we developed the downtown, the form-based code and the village overlay district, it was with the intent that we would have open space down there, and it was known that the town could have possibly taken it over in some type of capacity and been responsible for maintenance. Granted, yeah, it would be great, because then you guys would have to pay for all the upkeep, and that would mean less money that DPW has to.
I think just on our end of the bargain, we could help with ideas of programming the space. So it's kind of like just a partnership on that green space, so we get the most out of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been our understanding all along. I mean, we realized this is right in the middle of town, and it's definitely, that's why it sort of stayed in the design that way. And I think that we've got a little bit of housekeeping on an agreement, but I think we're on the same page as far as how it will be used. It's just a matter of documenting it in the process, which we're going to be very interested in doing, because we need to. If we don't, and it's just open to the public, then we're liable for all of it, which is on the private side, is a very challenging place to be. So it's going to be top of mind for us as well to make sure that we get all that taken care of.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Could you give me the exact breakdown of residential, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms? Are they going to be rentals? Do you have an exact
know yet.
breakdown?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you thinking right now? Because I mean, you have big buildings, and I know that you're already kind of accounting for store frontage, but what are you thinking right now right now?
So in concept, and I don't have my notes with me, but in concept, we have, I think, roughly 100,000 square feet of commercial space. And I think maybe I can get a nod from Julie on this. Is it a couple 100,000 square feet of residential space? These are real rough numbers, because we haven't, part of, getting the architectural input on this development, that begins to define the space. And so it's going to be really important. If we don't, work really hard at placemaking in here, then it's not going to feel good to anyone, and people aren't going to want to be down there. So that's a really important part of it. And that will ultimately define how much we can put in there and how comfortably we can do it. So that's in concept where we're at size-wise. We do feel as though mostly 1 bedroom and some 2 bedrooms, definitely, probably some studio units. There will probably be some, a couple or a few, I shouldn't say, I guess I don't know, but we aren't going to have a lot of emphasis on units larger than 2 bedrooms. There may be some in there, might be 2 bedrooms and an office, or maybe a penthouse unit somewhere that's larger, but it's essentially 1 and 2 bedroom units that we think are kind of an important component to a downtown space. So that's really what we're thinking about. As far as the mix goes, I think it's more heavily weighted on the more heavily weighted on the 1 bedrooms. There'll be some studios. There will be some 2 bedrooms. I think a decent amount of 2 bedrooms.
There's a big need for them in Berwick, really. Yeah.
The 2 bedrooms, I think, are definitely going to be important. But 1 bedrooms are for downtown, in a downtown setting, I guess a really important component. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think one of the things that we're really paying attention to, and we've have experience in this, how we design this. It's not. Families certainly can move in to a 2-bedroom unit, and there may be some, but it's really in a 1-bedroom unit. Some of these are geared for younger people that want to move back into town, or possibly people that are selling their home nearby and don't want to maintain anymore, but still want to be in town. We're finding that that's kind of the market for what we've seen.
Yep.
So I think we're not there are no restrictions that we're proposing on any of these, but that's generally what we're seeing.
I don't think you can or should restrict what kind of people can move into places. But I know a big concern, I know you guys both know a big concern is the impact on the school system. And that's a huge concern in town. I'm sure you've heard it over and over, and we hear it over and over. So we want to make sure that we're not encouraging loads of children to move.
I think
to
that if you're
Berwick.
leaning more towards 1-bedroom
Correct.
units, you're not going to have that issue. You're going to have.
That's what, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a way to naturally restrict it.
Right. And we are leaning that way. I think that it's really more so because that's what's appropriate for a village center area.
Makes sense.
And generally speaking, the families with multiple kids want to be where there's a bigger yard space and maybe out around the outskirts of that village center. But certainly in another project that we had done, we had a family with 2 kids move into a 2-bedroom unit. They stayed there for a year. They bought a house 2 blocks away a year later and moved there. So it's kind of a natural progression that way.
All right, I'll turn it back over to Dave. Mike?
No, I'm good.
Jerry?
Nope, I don't have anything.
Nicole?
No.
All right, and I just have a couple questions here from, is this going to be, you coming back to do one big lot? Because I know this is broken up into multiple lots now because we had to do this for brownfield grants, but is this going to be one big lot?
And that's a conversation that James and I need to talk about that. And James has, approached me with that he believes it may need to be broken into lots for some of the funding on the site for the VRAP. So that's a conversation that needs to happen. The intent would be that preferably if it can stay one lot, great. But if it has to get broken up into 4 lots, I guess we'll have to go that route if there's no other alternative. But the intent would be that it would be one parcel.
We have to look at, with lots and new setback creations, if it creates issues, and then I can just talk to the EPA coordinator, just ask him directly.
Frank Gardner, Main Director of the Brownfield Grant Program.
Yeah, I'll send an email to him.
Yeah, could you?
I'll also reach out.
Could you?
Because
Sure.
it's our understanding that right now, today, this is one parcel. It's not 4, it's not 5, it's one parcel. I called the assessor's office, and that's what it is on record. So
I thought it was like 8 parcels.
I thought it was 5.
Yeah, there's a recorded plan that's the 7 lots, but it was never It was never put into the 7 lots, so.
I'll talk to our surveying department because they did a ton of research.
So when it was registered at the the registry of deeds, it was registered as one lot?
I would have to say
Yeah.
that if it was 5 lots, it would have been shown on our existing conditions plan.
Oh,
So
so it was
I-
only
I
broken
will-
down into those lots, like, in concept
So I,
Concept.
for the, just for the DEP?
Yeah, there was a registered plan that split the lots. I'll send it to you, but then it was never done with our,
Actually recorded?
never put on our tax maps. It wasn't created into 7 different tax cards.
but it was recorded.
The plan, yeah, I'll send.
The plan we voted on, it was recorded, but it was never recorded in the registry of deeds.
Well, recorded
No,
is
yeah, no,
recorded
yeah, it was
for-
recorded.
No, I mean, it was
It wasn't,
voted on it, but it was never recorded.
yeah, it was recorded to the registry, but it was on the town side. The department never created the 7 files or, it would have been 7 different tax bills. It was always billed as one lot.
Okay. Another question is lighting. Are you gonna what type of lighting? I know we're gonna get that's kind of nitty gritty when we get
Yeah.
into that a little bit later. But are you gonna do underground utilities? Are you gonna be bringing in natural gas across the bridge? Are you thinking about that? No. Any solar?
We'll have to explore the natural gas extension. But it will be all underground utilities. I think that's one of the standards of the Village Overlay District. There are a handful of utilities out there today. We will have several new water connections, and I think we'll tap into the sewer over by the pump station. There is an existing stream that runs north to south across the site, and we'll have to work with DEP and Army Corps of Engineers on how to handle that. We did meet with DEP, and they said that the permitting around that stream, and it's a very streamlined process if we keep it in a pipe. But if we decide to open it up and expose the water and try to create like a Babylon Brook type through the southern area of the site, the permitting around that actually gets a lot more complicated, and it would require a full Natural Resource Protection Act permit, a full general permit through the Army Corps of Engineers. So that's still a discussion with Great Falls, whether or not we want to go that route, but there has been discussion on potentially opening that up. But again, it does present a permitting obstacle. The intent would be to keep it just like, almost like what you're looking at here on the screen, running it through a 48-inch pipe. We talked to the Public Works Department. There are no real drainage concerns. A couple times I understand that the water overtopped the roadway here. So I believe that's more of an inlet condition rather than an undersized pipe condition. So we have started to put together all the stormwater models. But in answering your question, all the utilities into the pipe will be underground. We haven't explored extending natural gas across that bridge. I don't know if the town has looked into potentially.
We have, it seems like, if that question's coming from, he knows.
We have looked into it. Yes. We understand the capital.
Yeah, so then.
So I have one more question, but then just one last question that came from this person was, how did it come to be that the town transferred the Wilson Street lot directly to JCC LCC with the quitclaim deed? Land transfer from town should have been to 20 Sullivan LCC, Fund of Jupiter per agreement with the town. Has the town Fund of Jupiter been amended to allow direct transfer to JCC LCC or LLC?
Is he talking about how the Wilson Street parking lot was directly transferred? Well, wasn't it all done at the table where he was at the table with the attorneys for Cahea, so it was all transferred at the same time. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'll look into what the exact detail of that.
And it's just this quitclaim deed that's got to be here from October 31st of 2019, so, which was signed by the selectmen. And then the last question that I have is just, or not question, but just a comment is just, I'm really concerned about the traffic downtown with the project this size. How close are you working with DOT and then, and I guess to the town as well? I know that you said you talked to DOT about the light of sight and all that, but traffic flows? We got to consider maybe making one-ways and things like that?
That will be all investigated as part of this project. So we do have a pre-application meeting coming up with Maine DOT, and we'll get their initial feedback at that meeting. And then after that, once we have it more ironed out what the exact area is for commercial space and how many residential units, once we have those numbers, we can come up with how much trips will be generated, and we fully anticipate that this will be a full traffic movement permit through Maine DOT. And that's going to be a permit that will be ongoing with the town approval as well as the Maine DEP approval. This will be a site location act permit. So that permit alone takes around 6 months to approve, and same with the Maine DOT traffic movement permit.
This project also, talked with Julie and our regional planning commission and our transportation group as well. This potentially could be studied further for a transit.
Is that CAX?
What's it? Yeah, CAX. Yeah, there's money for the shipyard about potentially opening up channels and transportation buses that are really integrated into the site, and opportunities for high-level transportation study for that. Speaking of studies in CAX, we're lined up for a CAX grant for 2024, just the way the funding cycles works, that addresses the Sawmill and School Street intersection. And we're aware that the intersection of Wilson and School is oftentimes a high crash location depending on the cycle. We need to replace that stoplight, and we need to replace the stoplight at the bridge. And replacing the stoplight at the bridge will help some of the circulation issues because of the timing problems. And I think if you look at levels of service for most of the intersections, they're pretty good. It's just the bridge that you look at the lower levels of service.
I know, I drive home that way every day. All right.
And looking at the sketch plan, you can probably see too that this raised island here, right, this intersection right out by Town Hall,
Yep.
this will certainly have to be reconfigured to work for this site. So I imagine some removal of those islands and restriping would be needed. But that will all be identified as part of moving forward. When we come before the board again, we will have some of those details ironed out.
Okay, I have nothing else. Anybody else from anybody on the board?
Just a quick question on trash. How do you foresee handling that? Where is it stored? Are we doing dumpsters?
That's one of those items that on the next iteration of this
Okay.
plan, we'll be showing where the dumpsters are, and those will be likely in all enclosures. Yep.
Anybody online, Jerry or Mike? Nicole, anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to seeing you again. All right, next on the agenda is the second public comment session. Do we have anybody in the waiting room?
Nobody in the waiting room and no emails.
Hallelujah.
Okay. Any informational items from staff?
Let's see.
We don't have any, James. You don't have to
Yeah.
come up with any.
No, I just
You don't have to make it up.
have a good night, everyone. How's that?
All right.
Jennifer, you got anything? All right, anything from anybody on the board?
Can we keep these?
Yeah.
All right, next on the agenda is the adjournment. Oh, before that, hold on. We do have one member of the planning board, Frank Underwood, who's decided not to continue on the planning board for another term. So we do have right now we have a regular member open position. We have an alternate, Jerry Graybill, right now, who's more than welcome to, if he wants to email me and James
You're promoted.
and ask to go before the selectmen to become a regular member for a 3-year term. And then we'll have 2 alternate positions after that. So, what's that?
This is great.
Maybe.
What a great idea.
So that's all that I have. So next is the adjournment.
Thank you, Frank.
Jerry. It's the only time you really get to talk.
Okay, I make a motion to adjourn. I'll second.
Hey, all in favor?
I don't vote, but. Bye, everyone.